Salutations one and all! So last year, after Volume 7 RWBY ended, I made a quick little video where I discussed my own thoughts and speculations on who RWBY would end up with at the end of the series, which ship would reign supreme and which ships would essentially sink. And the ultimate conclusions I came up with was, essentially RWBY is, at her heart, a huntress. That's who she is at the very core of her being, so it's entirely possible when the series ends, she'll be with no one. She'll continue to be a huntress above all else. She'll continue to go out into the wild time after time again, continue to fight the Grim, continue to make sure that people got their happily ever after by making sure they weren't killed by giant monsters. But I also saw some potential in Oscar, and it really did seem like the creators, like RWBY, were hinting that something's gonna happen between these two down the road. I mean, this whole giggle fit where they kept interrupting each other time and time again, that just screamed flirting, that just screamed compatibility, just screamed, okay, these two are gonna end up together. But besides him, there was also Penny. RWBY and Penny were so utterly close last volume and this volume, so I really thought, if anything, those two might end up being more than just friends down the road. But, Volume 8 happened, and things have certainly changed. Seriously though, if you've not yet watched Volume 8, please click off this video right now. I'm about to drop a very, very big spoiler, okay? Okay. So yeah, at the end of Volume 8, Jaune murdered Penny. That actually happened, right? We all actually saw that happen? I mean, seriously, I did not see that coming. I seriously did not see that coming. Even with all my wild, insane speculation, I just didn't see it coming. So yeah, obviously, Penny's out of the running for ending up with RWBY, and that's just utterly heartbreaking, because I so loved Penny as a character, and just her friendship with RWBY was so wholesome, so adorable, and it's just so freaking cute. And of course, I'm seeing a lot of people online theorizing, speculating, oh, Penny's coming back, Pietro will fix her like he did last time, and just, no, I really don't think that's gonna happen. I mean, for one thing, where the frick is Pietro? Seriously, he completely dropped off the map halfway through Volume 8 and was never seen or heard from or mentioned again. That's weird. That's really weird to me. But even if he is still alive, I just don't think he can bring Penny back. I mean, last time, her core wasn't damaged. Her robot body was still, essentially intact, and he was able to rebuild her from that. But now, not only did she die as a human, but her robot body was utterly destroyed when Ambrosius created the portals, so he doesn't have a whole lot to work with right now. I mean, maybe he has like a backup of Penny, like a spare body for her somewhere, but I think that would have been either, in his shop in Mantle or up in Atlas, and both of them are, kind of utterly and completely destroyed, flooded, and burned, so yeah, any replica Penny might have is gone, so no chance of him, bringing her back anytime soon. And even if he somehow manages to make a new body for her and somehow has a backup of all her memory files, it would still literally kill him, transferring over the remainder of his soul, the remainder of his aura, into her to bring her to life, and the version he creates wouldn't have her memories of being human, wouldn't have her memories of warm hugs, and that just seems so utterly sad. So I just have to say, Penny is gone for good. There's no bringing her back a second time. And that's just really sad. And it's definitely gonna be interesting to see how RWBY reacts to the news, not only of Penny's death, but of the fact that Jaune was the one who killed her. Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. That's gonna be very interesting. I mean, RWBY is, a very forgiving person, a very kind person, a very loving person. But at the same time, she's a person who cares very deeply for her friends, her family, her loved ones. I mean, RWBY activates her Silver Eyes not by thinking about anger or revenge or killing her enemies, but rather by thinking about protecting those she cares about. And she does truly care for Jaune, but she really cared for Penny, and I truly don't think RWBY would have been able to make that same choice if she had been in Jaune's shoes. She would have kept trying to find another way, all the way up till it was too late, until Cinder killed Penny and took the maiden powers from her. And this honestly really does impress me. It just shows how strong Jaune has grown, how strong his will has become, where he was able to do this. I mean, yeah, Jaune and Penny weren't particularly close, but she was a human being, someone his friends really did care for, and someone, he spent a good couple hours with on her final day, because he was using his semblance to help boost her aura so she could fight against the virus. Killing her would not have been easy for him, and I am just so impressed he was able to do it, but I can't imagine RWBY's gonna feel the same way. Like I said, RWBY's very kind and forgiving, but she cares so much about her friends, and finding out that one of her friends murdered her other friend is gonna probably go really badly. And I could truly see RWBY screaming at him, yelling that he should have found another way. He should have done something else. He should have found a way to save her, to protect her, to boost her aura so she could heal her wounds and keep fighting or something. And, oh, that's going to be painful. That's going to be really, really painful to watch. But, RWBY is also a very forgiving person. And I'm sure after a little while, especially, after talking it over with a friend, she'll realize that she was in the wrong for being mad at Jaune. And, she'll go to him. She'll say she forgives him. And they'll hug it out and they'll cry. And honestly, just, oh God, RWBY is such an overwhelmingly good person. I could actually see her, finding out the news from Jaune as he's like weeping and crying and saying, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And her just, saying it's okay and hugging him, telling him, just thank you for letting Penny die as she chose, because, Penny was a robot girl who chose how she lived and chose how she died. And I think RWBY would be happy to know at least, she didn't die at Cinder's hands. She died the way she wanted to, being able to pass the main power on to the person she wanted to go to. Oh, God. This is such a sad scene. It's just such an overwhelmingly sad scene. I'm so freaking depressed. And more than that, though, I am just really, really, really worried that RWBY is going to do that thing where, RWBY finds out Penny's death from someone else, and then Jaune decides not to tell her that he was the one who killed Penny, and that would just be, oh God, that would just be so painful to watch and so annoying as we wait for the shoe to drop and RWBY to find out the truth, and it just make everything so much worse. I mean, seriously, Jaune had the strength of will to kill an innocent human being because he knew it was the right thing to do, and I just hope he has, the same strength to tell her loved ones what happens. Ah, God, please, Jaune, please, do not disappoint me here. The only ones who should kill are those who are willing to tell their loved ones that you were the one who murdered them. Oh, God. And, yes, I am fully willing to admit it's very, very grim that I am attempting to use Penny's death as a way of getting Jaune and RWBY together, especially because I don't actually ship RWBY and Jaune together. Interesting. Honestly, I'd much rather Jaune have died and Penny have lived. But my point here is that Jaune killed RWBY's friend, RWBY's best friend in the whole world. That's something they need to discuss, and it could lead to some truly amazing moments where they discuss, loss and death, what it means to be huntress huntsman, and why it is they keep fighting time and time again, even after suffering as much as they have. I think that'd be an absolutely amazing scene. I'd so love to see it. I mean, seriously, RWBY and Jaune had like 0 good moments this entire volume, besides maybe their reunion at Schnee Manor, but even that was kind of like in the corner of the screen. And I am willing to forgive that because they were basically on other sides of the kingdom for most of the volume. But what I can't forgive is a lack of RWBY and Weiss moments, given they were basically within 100 feet of each other for 90% of the volume, and they were both going through some seriously dramatic stuff. I mean, RWBY was dealing with this utter hopelessness and uselessness as she wondered if any of her choices up to this point had been the right choice to make. And then later on, she was also dealing with the fact that her mother might have been grimified, which I am definitely going to do a video on down the road. And meanwhile, Weiss, who was fresh out the boat of arresting her abusive father, had to learn to trust her brother again and deal with her alcoholic mother. So yeah, that was a lot for both of them to deal with, and yet despite the fact they were right next to each other, they didn't actually, do anything to help one another the entire volume. I mean, Weiss put a hand on RWBY's shoulder at one point, and that was basically it. They had no, deep, long, emotional talks about what they were going through, about their shared experience, about anything. It was just weird. It was really, really weird. The fact that they didn't rely on each other more, and the fact that we got RWBY and Blake talking more than we got RWBY and Weiss talking, which... interesting. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not mad about that. I'm so glad we got some Blake moments with RWBY because that was like basically the first RWBY and Blake moment since their reunion back in volume 4. So, interesting. There were so many Whiterose shippers who were so angry last volume when RWBY had that whole mental breakdown when Salem mentioned her mother's name, and Weiss just kind of stood there off the sidelines like utterly dazed and confused. And that's what basically this entire volume felt like. RWBY and Weiss were both going through these awful, awful things, and the other just kind of stood off to the sideline kind of watching them from a distance. It really makes me feel like Whiterose will not be endgame. I mean, I really do feel like if RWBY was planning Whiterose being canon down the road, they would have used this time in Schnee Manor to better set it up, but they didn't, and that just really makes me think, it's not going to happen. Whiterose is essentially dead. I mean, I think in my last video, I actually said Volume 8 will be make or break it for Whiterose, and it feels like it was break it, not make it. So, sorry, Whiterose shippers, man, I'm definitely on your side. I definitely want these two to be a couple or just have some cute moments back and forth, but it just really doesn't seem like it's going to happen. I mean, that all being said, though, I did see a really amusing theory online a while back that I did just really want to share, even though there was a 99.999% chance it is not going to happen. Alright, so basically Bumblebee has been canon for the last 3 volumes, and yet despite that, we've yet to see a kiss between these two. Well, the theory basically states we're going to see a Whiterose kiss before we see a Bumblebee kiss. Not romantic, more like CPR. Actually, exactly like CPR, because, Volume 8 ended with them apparently being transported to some island that might be an alternate dimension, or might just be in some distant part of Remnant, not sure. But what if, the whole being transported to another world thing, or just transport of a long distance thing, caused RWBY or Weiss to be knocked unconscious, and they end up landing in the water, and then the other person saw it, had to fish them out of the water, and then give them CPR. I know it's insane, I know it's not going to happen, but I feel like that's the closest we could ever possibly get to a real Whiterose kiss in this series at this point. I would still love it. If that happened, I would be totally satisfied as a Whiterose shipper. But moving on, we still have one more person to talk about. Good old Oscar. Now, in my last video, I said, Oscar, he's not going to reunite with RWBY in Volume 8. Instead, he's going to be on his own journey, doing his own thing, growing, making new allies, becoming stronger and all this, and just, maturing as a huntsman. And that was actually, kind of right. I mean, yes, he did reunite with RWBY in basically the first scene of the volume, but after that, he went off on his own. He teamed up with Jaune, then later on was kidnapped by Salem, and then tortured a whole bunch. But then he was able to make allies through that process. I mean, he was able to win over Hazel and Emerald, and, winning over Emerald probably means he might have also won over Mercury down the road, so that could be definitely interesting. But, he made allies. He was able to convince them the power of friendship, and grew stronger, survived the torture, and just really impressed me time and time again. And I think we're going to see more of that in Volume 9. He's going to go to, I think, a Shade Academy, meet Headmaster Theodore, be both Ozpin and Oscar, and, probably take on more of a leadership role, get some more training from other huntsmen, learn to fight better, maybe even unlock his semblance, which I definitely think it's going to be some sort of time manipulation thing, so he could do some awesome combo attacks with RWBY. I really want to see that. And when RWBY eventually reunites with him, halfway through Volume 9, at the end of Volume 9, she will see him as a true huntsman. I just really want to see that. The only downside, though, is that Oscar is becoming more and more like Ozpin. And we saw that at the end of last volume when he stood like Ozpin, even though Ozpin was still more or less asleep. And this volume, it just kept happening time and time again. The way he stood, the way he walked, the way he spoke, it all just screamed Ozpin. I mean, there were several times this volume where I mistook Oscar for Ozpin. So yeah, the merging of their souls definitely, progressing rather quickly, and if it finishes up, that's just going to be a really weird ship for, RWBY to essentially be dating her former headmaster. Oh, no, please do not let that happen. I also have this weird theory that Ozpin is RWBY's great-grandfather. I mean, Silver Eyes are said to be a remnant of the God of Light's power, and Ozpin is the only person who's ever had an interaction with the God of Light. I mean, besides Salem, but that's a theory for another day. That's definitely a theory for another day, I promise. But yeah, so if the merging of souls does end up finishing before the series ends, then I just really don't think RWBY and Oscar can ever be canon, because it'd be way too creepy for her to basically be dating her former principal. Just, oh god, please no. That all being said, though, I am still really hopeful that when this series does end, when the gods return to the world and murder Salem, or, purify Salem, or do whatever they need to do to Salem to make her no longer a threat, then, Ozpin's job will be finished, and then he will no longer have to continue the cycle of death and rebirth time and time again. His soul will be allowed to rest, go to the afterlife, maybe with Salem's, I'm still a little unclear about that, and then Oscar will be left by himself, a single soul in a single body who is free to date whoever he wants. But seriously, before that happens, before their souls are basically torn apart, I really don't want RWBY and Oscar's relationship to advance all that much. I mean, he went in for the hug this volume, he was fairly confident in it too, so that's fine, but anything more than that, just please, God above, no. That'd be way too creepy, that'd be way too creepy. So yeah, just to wrap things up, like I said at the start of this video and last video, I do really think RWBY could be, a single huntress the rest of her life, fighting to protect the people time and time again until, she eventually passes on. But if that doesn't happen, it really does feel like Volume 9 will be John's chance to shine, chance to deepen his relationship with RWBY after murdering her best friend. That's going to be interesting. That's going to be really interesting to see. After him, Oscar probably has the best chance. I mean, I do think Volume 9 is going to be his opportunity to grow as a man, a huntsman, to become stronger, to become more independent, and figure out his own fighting style. I'm very excited to see that. The merging of the souls thing, though, that's definitely still creepy, and I'm really hoping they come up with a solution before the series ends. And then finally, there's Weiss, who, I mean, like I said, I really do want these two to end up together, but this volume just didn't give us any real reason to believe that was going to happen. I mean, the most we got was Weiss putting her hand on RWBY's shoulder. That was really it. So, Yeah, I mean, Volume 9 might change things. They're on a tropical island paradise together. Things might happen. One of them might need CPR. One of them might pretend to need CPR. Like I said, that's very, very unlikely, but I'm an eternal optimist. In fact, before I go, I'm going to throw out a few wild, insane ships. People RWBY probably has absolutely zero chance of ending up with, but who I think would form very interesting relationships with her moving forward. First off, RWBY and Blake. Now, obviously, there's a whole bunch of issues with these two becoming romantically involved. I mean, seriously, Blake is dating RWBY's sister. That would make a certain amount of sense. I mean, let's not forget, Ty dated Yang's mother first, and then ended up dating RWBY's mother after that, so Blake would just be, following tradition, more or less. Again, it's not going to happen, but I really did love RWBY and Blake together this volume. I mean, seriously, the talks they had where Blake basically said that RWBY was who she was when she was younger, but was broken by the world. And RWBY wasn't broken. RWBY kept being optimistic, kept pushing forward, kept believing that they could find happily ever after down the road. And I just so love that. And I just so wish we'd seen more of RWBY and Blake throughout this entirety of the series. I mean, the first volume when they met, where they discussed the books, it was just such a beautiful moment. And there's this absolutely great scene in the Blake anthology where RWBY and Blake exchange books and they talk about why they like one style over another. And it's just such an amazing scene that really, dives into their character, who they are as people, and I freaking love it. So yeah, RWBY and Blake becoming romantically involved, probably not going to happen. I really do hope they continue to lean on one another and become closer friends next volume. I really want to see that. Next up, we have Emerald. Now, obviously, she's in some sort of relationship with Mercury. I mean, maybe not necessarily romantic, but it is clear that he cares a great deal for her, so he'd probably be a little bit jealous if she ends up dating RWBY. That being said, though, he's also a cold-blooded sociopath and a serial killer, so I can't really imagine he's going to get, his own happily ever after. I think it's very, very likely that Mercury's going to die before the series ends. Sorry, that's just what I'm guessing for now. That being said, I'm not necessarily saying that RWBY and Emerald are going to end up in a romantic relationship, but, Emerald has stuck to Cinder time and time again because she more or less seems to view her as a mother figure that she never had, which is, so very, very creepy on so many levels. And, RWBY is much, much more kind-hearted and nice than Cinder is, obviously, so RWBY, being nice to Emerald, RWBY giving Emerald basically family, a place where she can feel loved and welcomed, would probably go a long way to helping Emerald, adapt to being a member of, Team RWBY, more or less, and becoming close to her, and maybe even unnecessarily creepily close to RWBY, sticking to her side at all times, and saying, oh, RWBY, where are we going today? RWBY, what are we going to do today? Hey, RWBY, what do you want to do today? And that would be super, super duper creepy, but better than her sticking to Cinder, I think. Again, super unlikely, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see how Emerald's relationship with everyone continues to evolve moving forward. And finally, we have Neo, which is, definitely interesting ship, given that Neo has spent the last, 3, 4, 5 volumes attempting to murder RWBY. So yeah, that's going to be awkward, it's definitely going to be awkward. But, they all seem to be trapped on a desert island together right now. So I think they're going to agree, okay, we should probably team up. Especially because, Cinder just attempted to murder Neo. And Cinder was Neo's original, target for revenge. So I could definitely see Team RWBY, convincing Neo to join their side to fight with them against Cinder and stop Salem from destroying the entire freaking world. And in a similar manner to Emerald, Neo has apparently always wanted a place to belong. I mean, in her song, One Thing, she says that Torchwick was her place, her family, the person who gave her a new name, a new identity, a new purpose in life. So if she ends up bonding with Team RWBY, becoming a member of the team, being, praised and treated well by them, she might end up becoming a good person. I mean, it's definitely unlikely, given that she is also a serial killer like Mercury, who I said wouldn't get happily ever after. I just don't know, but I can't imagine her story will end with her, trying to murder RWBY on this deserted island in Volume 9, and they'll, capture her, arrest her, kill her, whatever. That just seems like a waste for her character. But her joining the team, her trying to get revenge against Cinder now, would be such an amazing turn for her character, and I would so love to see her fighting alongside Yang and RWBY and the whole team. Oh, that'd be amazing. It'd be so utterly amazing. But please leave us down below. Who do you think RWBY's going to end up with? Which ships do you think will sail? Which ships do you think will sink? And what do you think of my thoughts on all this? What do you think is going to happen in Volume 9? Is everyone together on a desert island? Or are they going to be in different deserted islands, different parts of the world? Seriously, what are your random theories and speculations and guesses for Volume 9? I'm definitely going to do a video or two, give my own thoughts on that down the road. But link all this down below. Be sure to like, subscribe to this video. And until then, peace!
Do hugs always make you feel this warm inside? Yes.